Good morning, Mr. Ali Hiedar. How are you?
Great. Thank you for asking. Great to be here.
No, it's good. It's good to be here with you.
Thank you. Thank you. The
for
honor is
your
all
time.
mine.
Thank you for your time to do this podcast. Ali, we have an interesting topic to discuss today. Maybe a morose subject, a depressing subject for many,
A little bit.
but an essential subject for lots of people, and especially in the UAE, to know. Correct?
It's a necessary evil.
It's a necessary evil. So we're going to talk about divorce, ladies and gentlemen. Ali, the floor is yours, please.
Well, thank you for having me. Well, to establish the jurisdiction to ask for divorce in UAE, first you need to establish grounds for the courts to be able to look into the matter, such as you need to have at least one of the spouses domiciled in UAE, or at least they had a previous valid visa in UAE.
Right.
We can have the jurisdiction if one of the parties is not living in UAE. Only in the under the grounds if that other party is unknown, his whereabouts is unknown. So if you have one party living here, you don't know where the other spouse went to, you can still claim for divorce here in UAE.
So Ali, just want if I can take a step back, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Does that mean from your introduction there that the marriage contract that you're trying to dissolve or cancel has had to be registered in the UAE previously?
It has to be recognized in UAE, so it doesn't matter whether they got married in UAE or abroad, as long as they have a valid recognized marriage certificate here, as in attestation.
But if it's not attested, so for example, if I'm an Egyptian national in the UAE and I have a wife in Egypt and she comes and tries to file a divorce claim or vice versa, but we haven't attested or, as you say, recognized the marriage certificate in the UAE, how do we go about it? Is it possible or is it not possible?
It's not possible, unfortunately.
Okay.
We have to do the attestation first, or else the court would refuse to even recognize it or open a file for that.
Thank you so much. Follow-up question, and then I'll let you carry on and kind of fill in the gaps of the point that you were making. The religion of the parties, does that have an effect on divorce?
The religion of the man or the male, it has an effect, because if they are in different religions, so if the man is Muslim, it will be filed under Muslim family reconciliation. If it's a non-Muslim, then it's a separate division, which is the non-Muslim separate division.
So if I, for example, was married to our marketing lady Ashley and wanted to divorce her, she being a Christian and myself being a Muslim, it would fall under the Islamic divorce rules, right?
Well, in both ways, whether you're Muslim or not, it will follow the Sharia rules. What is different is the subdivision in the court, whether it will be with the Muslims or non-Muslim division.
So the default position in the UAE is that there's the Sharia principles of divorce, and of course then it goes into, given the parties' background, religious affiliations, and it goes into a different category.
True. It has a further implications when there is an ongoing case, like for example for witnesses. If it's with the Muslim division, the witnesses can only be Muslims. But if it's non-Muslim, the witnesses can be of any religion, whether Muslim or non-Muslim.
Interesting, Ali. Interesting. Very good. So sorry, I took you away from your main point. You can
Nah, don't worry about it. The next stage would be which court can we file in front, since there is 7 emirates. So which emirate can I go to? So usually it's the where the both spouses were domiciled. So it's a matrimonial home. So wherever they used to live together, that court will have jurisdiction.
Excellent. So what if I have a wife, which perhaps isn't the most practicable kind of arrangement, but I'm sure it happens, and she lives in a different emirate, and I live in Dubai, so she lives in, for example, Ras Al Khaimah, Abu Dhabi. What would we do in that scenario?
In that scenario, it would be the where the defendant lives. But that there we seen some exceptions. The court sometimes they lean towards the wife, since in the eyes of the court she is the weaker party. So if she chose to file where she lives, the court, it's very highly that it will establish jurisdiction where she lives.
Very good. So thank you for that, Ali. That's very clear. Can you talk to me more about now the process? So now I figured out that I want a divorce. I figured out the jurisdiction where I should go and apply for a divorce. What happens next?
What happens next is by law, by family law in UAE, you have to register a file called a family reconciliation file. So in that department, their main job is to minimize the number of cases that goes to court, and of course to try to reconcile between the two parties. So they will sit down with the two parties. They will try to figure out what's their issue, whether they can rectify the relationship or not, and try by all means to mend the relationship. If it's not, and they want amicable divorce, they can reach a settlement in front of the family reconciliation department, and it will be enforceable as if they went to court.
So are these people trained and qualified legal professionals, or are they religious kind of not, I was going to say religious people, but I mean, are they part of an institution that's, for example, related to the state or the Awqaf ministry? Or what I'm trying to ask is, the people that try to bring the spouses together again, what their official role is or the capacity is.
So their official capacity, they are employees by the court,
Okay.
but they have special training to look into the family matters, and they are fully aware of the family law and Sharia law.
Brilliant, fantastic. So let's say, being the devil's advocate, that we went through the process and it didn't work. And by the way, Ali, how long does that process take?
Well, they have a minimum of 2 sessions. You won't find that in the law, but it's one of the dialogue in court, especially if it's Muslim reconciliation.
Yeah.
It has to be at least 2 sessions, and the file needs to remain open in front of the family guidance member at least for a month, to prove to the court that he have taken every possible step to reconcile between the parties.
At least a month. But I'm guessing routinely it goes longer than that, right?
In some cases, yes. When we seen a couples that were willing to talk and more willing to work out their disputes, the family court member will give them as much time as they want, basically to make sure that all efforts have been taken to reconcile between them.
Okay, very good. So then we didn't reconcile, unfortunately, me and my partner. We then do we get a kind of piece of paper from these people saying that there's a referral to the court or something? What happens next?
So there's 2 cases. If you basically have disputes that you cannot resolve and you still want divorce, but you want to have the divorce amicably, you can draft a settlement in front of the family reconciliation, and it will be binding and enforceable. It will include custody, alimony, financial support. Every aspect of the divorce can be agreed in front of the family reconciliation, and you can have the divorce paper in the same day. If the 2 parties are not in any kind of agreement and they want to dispute their financial rights and custody, then the family reconciliation department issues an NOC letter that the 2 parties have went through the family reconciliation and they couldn't basically fix it between them, and that piece of paper is a crucial evidence in the file when you go to file it in front of the court. Without it, it won't be the case wouldn't be accepted, and the NOC is valid for 3 months.
Okay, interesting. And what are the valid grounds of a divorce here in the UAE?
Well, the most famous would be for discordance, and basically if they can't live together anymore, that they can't stand each other, living together is out of the question. So it can be on the grounds of harm that done to one of the parties, or basically one party is at fault, or both of them. It can be for non-financial support is one of the husband obligations here in UAE. If the husband is not providing any financial support, if it can be for infidelity, it can be for insanity, it can be for a number of reasons.
What about not having sex for over 4 months?
It is grounds here in UAE, although it's a bit hard to establish in front of the court, but it can be.
Why is it hard to establish?
Well, it's an intimate relationship, but it's hard for third parties to
Right.
have knowledge of it. But it can be deduced from the evidence, such as if the two parties are living in two separate countries or
Right.
they live in two separate emirates, so it can be deducted.
And of course, if they admit it,
Of course.
yeah, that's something else. Great, fantastic. Because that I've always found an interesting aspect of it, and that's from Sharia, isn't it?
Yes,
Right.
it is by Sharia. The evidence part in this case, usually to obtain a entry and exit log from the immigration
Yeah.
to prove that the other party been away from home for a significant period of time.
Interesting.
That would show that they have been disconnected physically for a long period of time.
Interesting, interesting. Fantastic. So that's very clear. Once a divorce order is given, or judgment allowing the divorce is given, what happens next? Is it an immediate judgment there and then, or does it take time?
Well, it can take some time, but before the judgment is given, there is a few things that needs to be established first. First, we need to prove the case, and it depends on whether the man or the lady who asked for divorce and what is their claim. So, if they're claiming for discordance or for erotic behavior, insanity, whatever the claim is or the grounds for divorce,
Yeah.
they need to establish it. So the way to establish that is either by witnesses or of course, evidence and documents, or by two arbitrators.
So, Ali, you made me think of something else there. Is it a level playing field in terms of if the man can apply for a divorce and a woman can apply for a divorce, or is it, as we hear, it's heavily skewed towards the male favour? Can you talk about that?
Honestly, it's the contrary. The courts here are very more persuade towards the in favor of the ladies, since in the eyes of the court, they are the weaker party.
Right.
So they are given a lot of help, and the courts always steps in their favor, especially when it comes to custody.
So, because we always hear as Arabs and Muslims in this region, that if a lady wants to get divorced, apart from obviously certain jurisdictions, I think Egypt being one of them, where they have a very developed divorce or khula law, in these in other Arab countries, my understanding is, and correct me please if I'm wrong, is that if a lady wants to get out of the marital relationship, she has one option, which is what we call in Arabic khula. Is that correct?
Well, khula is recognized here, but there are more grounds
Yes.
here for the lady to ask for divorce. For example, abuse, whether it's physical or verbal.
But what's the difference, Ali, between the khula in Arabic and a divorce? Or is it the same thing?
Well, for khula, there's not much fault to need to be established from the wife's side. So basically, khula is the waiver for all of her rights,
Exactly,
financial rights,
exactly.
in exchange of divorce. But when she asks for divorce for her fault, she needs to establish fault, or she
Right.
needs to establish the abuse. So she can take divorce, and on top of it, all of her rights, financial rights, and custody.
So going back to my initial point, and that's a criticism of many a commentator on Islamic divorces across the world, not just in the UAE, is that it's heavily in favour of the husband's position. Why, Ali? And you just touched upon it. Because in many places, and I want you to talk about your experience here, the lady will be left with no other option other than the khula, which is to, as you just said, waive her financial rights in the relationship simply to get a divorce, because it's so difficult for the lady in the relationship to prove a valid ground for a divorce. What's your opinion on that?
Well, I believe I have to disagree. It's the contrary. So there is more of unspoken rule here in UAE. The
Good.
court won't force a lady to go back to her husband's house that she doesn't want to live with him.
Yeah.
That won't happen. So it's rather easy for the court to give her the divorce if she can at least establish that there is some fault from his side and there is numerous grounds for it.
Okay, interesting. Thank you for that. That's clarified my understanding of the situation. So, alimony. Talk to me about alimony.
Well, alimony is one of the financial rights for the spouse after divorce, and it's one of numerous. So there is a lot of kinds of alimony. So the first one would be a compensation for divorce, which is can be up to 1 year of previous to marriage. So whatever she was entitled to 1 year previous to marriage, she will get it as a refund after the divorce as a compensation for the divorce if the fault is from the husband's side and she's at no fault. Another form of alimony would be a financial support for 3 months after the divorce, that's separate from the compensation for divorce. Another form of alimony would be the child support and the nanny support. So she acts as a nanny for her children if she has any,
Yeah.
and she's entitled for a fee for taking care of her own children. Of course, that's also separate from the financial support from their kids, from the children. They are entitled for financial support, school allowance, housing allowance for the mother and the children. She's entitled for nanny fee. She's entitled for a maid. She's entitled for a driver. She's entitled for gas money for the car that's gonna take the kids. She's entitled for even a car to take the kids to school and to drive them around. That's all falls under the alimony of the wife. So
Wow.
the claim that the courts here are tipped in the favor of the man, that is like highly and very untrue, since the wife is entitled for all of that after divorce.
That's very good to hear. My follow-up question to that comment, however, is how are these allowances arrived at, or how are they calculated?
Well, it depends on the income of the husband, and as net income, his total income per month. So if he has properties, he have luxurious cars. If he, of course, his salary, if he has savings, all of that falls into account while calculating the alimony.
And how does the court obtain that information?
Well, we launch a series of inquiries. Like, for example, for the cars, the court addresses the RTA to report back of his ownership, his car ownership.
Yeah.
The court also addresses the land department for any properties and the banks for his financial statements.
Right, so it can do all of that just as in a normal civil or commercial case.
True.
Interesting. So you must see lots of disgruntled spouses trying to remove assets in these scenarios.
Well, we can actually, we have seen a number of cases where one of the spouses try to basically move his assets or even dissolute them. But we can go back, the court can ask, for example, for financial records, the court can ask for 3 years prior financial records to show if he has disposed of his funds.
That's very interesting. So it seems as if the legal position in the UAE is more developed than many would think in relation to divorce.
You would be surprised. You would actually be surprised. They're very fair. They even went to appointing a financial expert in a family case. To one of the grounds for alimony is so that the lady is entitled for the man providing all financial support for her.
Yeah.
So if she pays anything from her own money, even if she works, she's entitled for a refund up to 1 year of her own money after divorce. So we can actually appoint a financial expert to establish that she'd been spending or he'd been spending her own money prior to the divorce, and she can claim for a refund.
Excellent. Last question I have, what is an idda period?
Idda is a mandatory 3 months waiting period that the lady must wait after the divorce, unless it was the third divorce.
Right, and I'm guessing again, once again, I don't want to keep repeating myself, but these concepts and these principles are Sharia based, right?
It's Sharia based and it has a reasoning behind it. So the idda, or the waiting period, or the financial support for the lady, if she's pregnant, it actually extends until she gives birth.
Uh-huh.
So the 3 months waiting period is for the. It should be until we find out whether she's pregnant or not. If she is, her waiting period will extend until she gives birth, and also her financial support. He has to financially support her as if she's still his wife.
Interesting. Last question,
Of course.
and then I'm gonna ask if you have anything more to add. But this is a practical question that I'm wondering if you've seen any change in the number of divorces due to the COVID pandemic in the Dubai court specifically.
Interesting. It has actually been increased. I believe a lot of couples they spend too much time at home together, and
I mean, you can understand why, right, Ali?
of course, everyone been in quarantine and everyone has been in each other's faces. We have seen a spike in the number of divorces after COVID.
And how have the courts dealt with that? How have they dealt with the increased caseload?
Actually, they have introduced new changes to the law, trying to minimize the numbers of divorce. So they, in some shape or form, they try to highlight or magnify the proof of fault in the divorce cases, so couples wouldn't take it lightly. So only couples with the genuine issues and genuine fault that can claim for divorce. They're trying to deter it from like going and asking for a divorce on a whim. So
excellent. Do you have anything else, Ali, to add?
no, thank you. I think we covered it all.
So Ali, thank you so much. I hope I never have to avail your services in this regard.
I really hope so.
And thank you. That was very, very helpful, very informative. And I hope our next subject will be more positive and cheery.
Inshallah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a good day.